Hello and welcome again to a new episode of the KewCast, your weekly digest for gear-related pickleball content. It's a new intro, Eddie. We're embarking on new grounds here.
Yeah, let's give the scriptwriters a raise.
Well, I'm John, and I'm joined again by my good friend Eddie, who is, by the way, also a Gemini.
Also,
Yes.
do you know someone else? My twin?
No, this is another factoid about you, Eddie.
Oh, jumping into the personal stories.
That's right.
Right off the bat. Okay, what do you got?
Gemini, that's what I got.
Oh, okay.
You're a Gemini, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Excellent, yes. Each week I'm going to try to
Dig up a new
factoid.
until all my personal private information is on the internet.
I've got a few.
What's your zodiac?
I'm an Aquarius, just barely. I'm January 21st. So
I was going to say that's early February or late January, right?
Yeah. So I don't know what that means. I'm not a big astrological sign kind of person, but
You're the water bear.
I like it. Yeah, the water bear, yeah. I do know that
You
much.
feel like you're retaining water?
Well, let's drink some more electrolytes and we'll find out.
What about your Chinese zodiac?
I do not know that. What's yours?
Rooster.
Rooster? Okay.
Cock.
Yeah,
A big
fitting.
All right, well, we'll uncover that little detail next week.
That's good. All right, let's jump into personal stories. So, anything from you, Eddie?
No, I'm going to pass on this week now that we've already divulged my...
Yeah. So I had a couple of things. One was somebody we were playing pickleball in our pickleball group reached out to me and said, hey, I've got a new court opening up in Denver. It's just an indoor facility. We have one court right now and a half court for a kitchen. We're looking to expand. So he invited me out there, and I went out last week and played some games with him and his friends. It's actually a really nice facility. It's called The Station. It's out in Denver. Shout out to Tony and Onyo, the owners. Tony was the guy who invited me. And the coolest thing about this, besides all, it's a really nice facility indoors. And when they do expand, they're going to have 2 courts. It gives me like a orchard vibe, so one of those nice indoor facilities.
Really intimate.
Yeah. And, they have the cameras set up for those new AI tools. I forget what they're called, but
Oh, the line calling?
yeah, they analyze your play and tell you your percentiles for third shot drops and all
I
that.
see.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Really good stuff. Show you a heat map of where you were standing on the court most of the time. And best thing about it, there's a big sign as you drive into the parking lot. It says Kew Industrial Park, KEW Industrial Park. So there we go. It was meant to be. Yeah. I'll show some B-roll footage of it.
That was for you, or that was just?
No, that's actually what that place is. Like the center is called Kew Industrial Park.
That's bizarre.
A series of warehouses. I guess there's another person.
I looked up Kew on the internet one day, and I think I came up with some metal factory in Thailand or someplace like that, or
maybe
Malaysia.
They expanded to Denver.
Perhaps so.
Yeah. So.
So this place will ultimately be a commercial establishment, not a private club.
Yeah, actually, I missed the opening. I did not get a chance to go. My family came in. But they had an opening on Saturday, and yeah, you can rent courts there. They plan to do Tuesday night pickleball style tournament type things.
Nice.
And, yeah, lots of good plans and really nice facility. They did it right. Everything is black backdrops. The noise isn't crazy. It all looks really nice, and the court has no dead spots. And it's a little tight and in spaces, but man, it's a really nice facility.
Well, great for you if you can get in there and set up your cameras and all that, because there's you don't have to fight with other people on other courts and balls flying everywhere and noise and
for sure
and all that.
Yeah, I filmed some games with the Fat Boy, and that'll be going into the footage for this week's review coming in hopefully tomorrow. That's when it's dropping. So, yeah, really nice place. I got to get you out there as well. Otherwise, I spent every time I have all my ducks in a row, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting ahead of things. Something happens. So this weekend, I spent 2 days in the hospital, not for myself, but for one of each of my 2 boys. So Charlie, my youngest, was roller skating with his mom and with friends, being watched by his mom. Fell and just face planted, broke his front tooth right in half. I mean, it was really gnarly. It looked like he was going to have to get surgery, but thankfully it was just right before the nerves where it broke, so they put a temporary cap on it. He's going to go get a more permanent cap today. He's in there. And then they have to figure out a solution when he's fully grown, like 16 to 18 years old. So, yeah, roller skating. And then 2 days later, their mom calls me again and just like, Children's Hospital again right now. And I'm like, what? Who is it this time? Alec. So this is my older son. He was skateboarding and face planted also, and sprained his ankle really bad. We thought it was broken, but not thankfully. The sprain he has is, I've had it before too, is more painful than a broken bone, and it takes longer to heal. Thankfully, he's 14 years old, so his bones are like rubber, and that protected his bones, and he's able to heal faster. Yeah, so there we go.
How many combined hours did you spend in the hospital?
At least 6 hours each day.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no quick trips to the ER.
There's no quick trips. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. They're what I always say, though, is that injuries, unless they're too bad, but injuries build character for sure, especially for kids.
Toys with wheels, man.
Watch out for toys with wheels. Yeah. Boy, I relate. I grew up a skateboarder, and I was... My parents didn't take me to the hospital ever. They didn't quite believe in it unless there's a bone poking out. So I had so many broken bones and strains and sprains.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, you're right. When we grew up, you were near death if you went to the hospital.
Yeah. Now it's just like drop of a hat. Kids are in a hospital.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
Well, let's hope that run is over with and you can focus on what's really important.
No calls today.
New YOOLA paddles.
The new YOOLA paddles. Let's move on. That's a good segue, Eddie.
You like that?
I appreciate that. The YOOLA Pro Edition, so this mod TA15, which we've seen Federico Stocksrud and other YOOLA pros playing with after the delisting of all the Gen 3 paddles, is now up for sale, pre-sale at least. So YOOLA put it up on their website. It is only in the Perseus shape. There are no other shapes, but there are two thicknesses of that, the 16 and the 14. So this is the originally USAP approved prototype of the Gen 3s, originally the Alphas, which was approved, I think, March of 2023. It was early last year when it was approved. But if you look at the website, they're still advertising the propulsion core with the graphic of that clear trampoline effect.
This diving board.
It's just like a big middle finger to USAP for everything that's going on from YOOLA. I think they maybe could have been more discreet with describing the core, but it's basically the same thing as
it's the first Alpha,
the Gen 3s, the first Alpha.
Yeah.
Now the question is, does it have the same crazy levels of grit? Because grit came into the whole deal with the delisting. If you read the YOOLA lawsuit, and clearly this is one-sided perspective of things, but whoever wrote that was claiming that the USAP was grabbing for straws to try to ban that paddle and landed on the grit, which was on the paddles that they sent in for recertification. Apparently too much grit on that raw carbon fiber texture, based on the Starrett test. And then the statement submitted by YOOLA to the court said that they had a laser scan of all the paddles before they ever went in, and they followed them. Anyway, so I contacted YOOLA, and they said they would send me one. Eventually, I may end up just buying one just to get the news out. Is it comparable to the Gen 3s? But if I had to guess, I would imagine that the grit is probably more toned down than the crazy grit that's stuck on your T-shirt from the original Gen 3s. Otherwise, everything's going to be the same.
And what's with the name?
So that was the original name of the original prototype of the Alpha.
It's their internal coding.
It's their internal
nomenclature.
Coding. So they got it approved, and there was no issue with submitting paddles that didn't match. So TA15 it is. And it's, really subdued graphics. It's just black graphics with TA15 on it.
That's just the front side. The back side, it has USAP approved and 3-inch typeface.
That's right. Yes. So we will see. I mean, would I recommend buying these? By the way, they cost $275, or $280, same as the Gen 3s. I might recommend holding off unless you absolutely loved it and you have the money to spend. I might recommend holding off because they are actually in court right now over the Gen 3s, and YOOLA USAP has been like I said, a little trigger happy with delisting. So they may find another reason to delist these as well.
Holding off is probably good advice.
All right.
Moving on.
Really quickly, I don't want to get into this too much. You got to leave early-ish today, but UPA is going international. So they have 5 destinations starting in early 2025 for different tournaments hosted by the PPA in different areas. It's going to be in Melbourne, Australia, Mumbai, India. There's one in Toronto, Canada, one in Asia, which is location unknown as of yet, as well as Europe, location unknown. So that'll be interesting. I mean, I know that Australia has a pretty thriving pickleball scene.
Yeah.
I did not know much about the scene in India. Yeah.
Oh, I think there's quite a large Indian contingent,
Okay,
which
great.
makes sense for them to choose that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And yeah, we've heard the news about Asia.
If you were
booming.
to choose an Asian country or a European country based on what you think are like the most popular places for pickleball, what would you think?
For Europe, it's probably going to be England. You know, I know they have proper tournaments in England.
Yeah, Spain potentially.
Potentially. I don't know. I mean, I think Spain's pretty married to tennis. Have you heard much about pickleball in Spain?
I think they're coming along.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about Asia? What do you think?
Vietnam,
Okay.
Thailand. It's picking up in Korea. I know that, but I don't know that it's reached the point of enough saturation there.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see the turnout and, you know, what the PPA does with the production of it and what the talent is going to look like. You know, I saw some clips from the previous PPA event they had in Australia, and good talent there. I mean, if it wasn't...
So you think they will draw enough of local folks within the professional ranks to make it feel like a local or a national tournament versus just having all the current PPA players playing in a different
transfer
location?
over there. Yeah, so there's a list of players, current pro players, attending these. I don't know if they're going to attend every single one, but I saw like Annalie Waters and Ben Johns. So yeah, the question is it going to be like an exhibition with top pros and then some 5-0s plus? You know, maybe we'll see. It'll be interesting to find out what they have in store.
I think it's really wonderful. If we can do more stuff like this to really boost pickleball across the globe, I think it's great for the sport, but great for Olympic prospects as well down the line.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Well, let's move on. Let's move on to this week's main topic. So, you and I, Eddie, tested a few paddles, the wide body versions of Kevlar-faced paddles, and there are not that many on the market yet. So there are actually only a couple of proper wide bodies, which I define as anything over 8 inches wide.
Yeah.
Right. So we expanded that category to include standard shape paddles. So anything 8 inches and above in width. All right. So we had on our list, we wanted to look at the Fat Boy, which is dropping this week. Spartus Apollo, which I've had for a good while now. Honolulu J3K.
2 of them.
Yeah, the standard and the pro, the GRUVN LAZR, which is a newish paddle, and another newish paddle, the 11624 Monarch. Which one is it? The Control? No, the Pro.
The Control.
Is it the Control? I'm not sure.
It's
I may
the
have
Control.
it wrong in the
The
notes.
all-cord is their carbon fiber.
Okay, you are correct.
Thank
God, these naming systems just got me.
This
got me
company in particular.
double questioning myself. So I also reached out. There's one more wide body, which is the Ethos Dunamis, and the owner got back to me quickly. Unfortunately, the paddle just came in today. This is the one.
It's an alien.
It's
an alien face.
Alien eyes on there. He said this is kind of a prototype. The holes in the bottom, the shape is changing a bit. And there's no graphics on this, as you can see. Would have been cool to test this, but unfortunately, we did not get a chance. It's like he sent me his personal.
I was going to say, it looks like you
Just
put
let
it through the
up
ringer
and-
already, John. What the heck?
It's already got the grip on it and everything. So we've got a few to talk about today. How about we start with the Fat Boy?
Let's do it.
Yeah. I'm reviewing it this week, so I could say a lot. I'm going to keep it brief, but I want to hear your perspective, Eddie.
So the first thing right off the bat is I had to change the grip. Something about the bread and butter grip. It's really, their whole line is kind of soft and it really increases the diameter, of the grip. So I changed that out. Other than that, man, this is a solid paddle. Loved it in Dallas when we first saw a kind of pre-production run of it, and this thing is fantastic. Great sweet spot, very controllable, easy resets. I would say of the paddles we saw, it might be up there as far as pop goes.
Right.
What do you think?
Yes, I agree with all that. And to your point about the handle, it just got me thinking, as an aside, before I get into the Fat Boy in particular, I've been leaning more and more toward polyurethane inserts in the handle instead of the foam. So the way, I forget, slats, I think is what they call them. I forget what the terminology is, but to create a handle in a pickleball paddle, usually the entire paddle is cut out based on the core and the shape of the paddle, including the handle. So it's like a 16 millimeter core extending all the way down the handle. And then they put these two little slats on either side to create that octagonal shape. And those slats can be like a higher density foam, which is kind of soft and squishy, or polyurethane is another option. I'm sure there are others, which is very firm. And there are even some paddles like the speed up paddles, which have a entirely cast polyurethane handle. I love the feel of those. I think Head makes that as well, like a cast polyurethane handle. And I prefer those the best. Second best I like is the polyurethane slats. And then third best is my least favorite is the
Basically
foam.
firm to mushy.
Yeah, and you can if you don't like firm grips, you can soften it up with your grip. But I like to have that foundation feel really firm, and it just feels more quality. To me, that's starting to feel like a squishy handle. It's starting to feel like the Gen 1 handles with the exposed polymer on the sides. To me, it's just
100%
like
agree.
As soon as I pick it up, I'm just like, oh no, I'd like put a little more effort in the paddle. I'm not picking. I don't even know if the bread and butter Fat Boy has polyurethane or foam. It's fairly thick, which I think was your issue. I don't know how squishy it is, but do you remember when you took off the grip what it is? Is that black foam, or is that like a whitish polyurethane?
Black.
Okay, so it's probably the softer grip. Anyway, just something that I think we can kind of advocate for paddle companies to start switching to. I think it's a higher quality handle.
I agree. For me, it translates into better feel. And even if that feel is bad on an off-center shot, that's feedback that you want it to have.
Yeah.
You don't want to necessarily mute that. It's like giving yourself an Advil overdose when you're not feeling great.
For sure.
Sometimes it's okay, but you want to feel the pain so that you know something's wrong.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, the only possible advantage to a softer foam handle would be vibration damping. I'm sure there's some benefit to that, but there's probably harder materials that you can also put in, or polyurethane, which is not that vibration damping, plus other damping materials on the grip or something like that to compensate for the added vibrations of harder materials.
Yeah. But all that withstanding,
Yep.
take off the original grip, replace it with some over grips, a couple of them actually.
Yeah.
And you've got a winner there.
Yeah. So back to the Fat Boy, and the grip. So it's a 4.25-inch circumference grip, which is right about where I like it. So, I kept the original grip on, the factory grip, and put one over grip over that, and it fits my hand just fine. So I like it as it is. But overall, the paddle, like you said, really massive sweet spot, as expected with a wide body. And it's barely just a wide body. It's just 8.1 inches wide. I measured it. I think there is a slight flare going up the sides too. But I'd say of all the paddles we tested today, this one has the most forgiving feeling sweet spot. I think the Spartus Apollo has the widest sweet spot, but overall, something about the shape of the Fat Boy and the density of it, man, that sweet spot just feels like it goes on for days.
Now, I noticed the other day you added some weight to it.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of weight at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, so 3 gram lead strips on each side. And I noticed this with all wide body paddles that, yes, you get a large twist weight and a very wide sweet spot, but with the extra width going from side to side, you still get more twisting on off-center shots. And part of the advantage of a wider paddle is that it is more forgiving and the sweet spot is wider, but there is some twisting. So I feel like the lead tape, as long as it's lower than the balance point, shores up some of that twisting. I mean, it's going to shore it up here as well, but you're going to start counterbalancing.
That's about right on the balance point there where you have it.
Yeah, the balance point thing is just below the donut there. But yeah, so I've got 6 grams total lead tape on each side, and that I feel like really just hit home for me. Did not put a slice cap in this. I've not experimented with slices on this. I feel like it's a really good balance as it is. And I don't know if this is something I do want to experiment with, a slice on a wide body paddle, but I don't think I'm going to like it because a wide body paddle, given its shortness, is already going to have a low balance point.
Yeah.
And a slice cap I feel like it's going to counteract some of the power that you get in wide bodies. And you don't want to drop that too much because the wide bodies don't have inherently big power.
I didn't feel like any of the wide bodies we played with would benefit very much from a slice cap.
True. I agree. Have not tested it yet, though, and something that I think we should test.
I think this of the 5 paddles we played with this week is the most attractive shape. I think the shapes of a wide body can get a little off-putting.
Do you know I had an idea for our thumbnail for this? So
I thought you were going to say for our pizza restaurant.
That was the idea. So I've got a guy in India that does the thumbnails for me now, but I send him like the ideas, and it's a lot of fun, like just brainstorming for ideas and like sending photos and like, hey, put this together. But I wanted you and I to pose like this.
Yeah.
The Colin Johns, like you and I together with the wide bodies. Do you remember that? The Yola ad with Colin Johns turned into a meme. Like, I'm going to get this pizza out of the oven.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
I mean, definitely the Apollo and some of the other ones are very much that sort of giant spatula shape. This one's it's very tame. I like it.
Yeah, and it's a new shape. So Bread and Butter spent the money to get a new mold, a new thermoformed mold at their factory, and I think it served them well because there are some others that quickly followed with a nearly identical shape. So seems like they're borrowing aspects of this, but yeah, I agree. This is aesthetically pleasing. Mm-hmm. Shorter handle, the 5.25 inch handle, but given the taper, I didn't find it an issue to do 2-handed backhands with my finger on the back, which is my normal hold. It would be nice to have a little extra room, but even with, I'd say above average size hands, I can use a 2E on this.
You know, there's some real magic in there because the swing weight is very low.
Yes.
I think it's like 110 or something like that.
Right.
And sometimes with those very low swing weight paddles, they feel a little bit thin. This feels very solid. Mm-hmm. The face is very consistent, as you mentioned. So, I mean, just striking that balance is very difficult. But Doug seemed to have accomplished something there. Yeah,
and you hit the nail on the head with your comment about pop. I was surprised how poppy this thing was. Now, I'd still call it a control paddle, but leaning all court and that entire leaning aspect of it is concentrated in the pop. So at the kitchen, when you counter or speed up, there's plenty of offensive options with this, which is nice. If you are looking for a control-oriented paddle, a control paddle with more offensive options, I think this is a good one.
There you go. Number 2.
Let's go to the Monarch. So this is a really similar shape. I think the top is a little more angular,
longer handle.
But the difference being the Monarch has a longer handle. Not a huge amount, but I think these are really, really complement each other. And they're a good comparison to compare these two. So, Eddie, first I want to get to your thoughts on the Monarch.
I love this paddle. And for me, that little bit of extra handle length, I think is optimal. I think the face to handle length on this thing, the ratio between the two is just, for me, just right where I want it because I like a little bit more real estate down low. This is a great paddle. It's also got a little bit more pop than I was expecting from something named the Control or Control Plus or whatever it's called, particularly from a Kevlar, right? It's, I think, aside the Fat Boy, those two are right up there on pop on this list.
To compare this to the Fat Boy, they both had a very solid feel, so not hollow. Some of these paddles feel a little hollow, and some people like that. I like how this it has more plow through. It feels like a heavier paddle than it actually is, which I think is a huge benefit of these sorts of wide body paddles with low swing weights, really low swing weights, low balance points, but still feel like they have plow through. That's a huge perk to me. So this felt very similar to the Fat Boy in terms of the plow through, kind of the solidness of the paddle. You're right. The extra handle length was a perk. The trade-off for me with the handle is that there's a little bit less real estate in the face, so that the sweet spot felt a little bit smaller on the Monarch than the Fat Boy. I'd say of all the paddles, the Fat Boy probably had the biggest sweet spot. Like I already mentioned that. This one just felt, it felt great. Big sweet spot, not quite as big as the Fat Boy. And for me, this one had a little bit more power on full swings than the Fat Boy, but a little less pop. And that makes sense to me also in terms of the shape of the paddle, because you're going to get, more power with a longer handle, right? You're going to get more leverage with that handle, but it's also going to be a little bit harder to maneuver in your hands.
So on my personal paddle, I add 6 grams on each side. Swing weight's still only like 113.
Right.
But the twist weight is up at 8.5, maybe even a little bit higher. So,
if I remember correctly, you had one here and
exactly one above, right below that curve.
Okay.
And man, it just opens up that sweet spot even more.
Yeah.
And it wasn't small to begin with, but it just adds that level of consistency, especially on those lower on the paddle face shots.
Right. We haven't talked about spin yet, but I'll just kind of make a blanket statement that all the spin on all these paddles is all above 2,000 RPM, and most of them are just barely above 2,000. There are a couple of standouts that we'll talk about here in terms of exceptional spin, but spin's good on these. And yeah, I think I've covered most of what I think about the Monarch. I think it's a fantastic paddle,
It is great. Now they sent also a fully carbon fiber version of that paddle. It's called the All Court, I believe. I had a hard time distinguishing the two. They're very similar in performance to me.
Right.
It could just be a slight difference in feel, maybe a little bit in pop, but they're very close.
Very close, yeah. And I think you and I chatted about this. I need more time with the All Court before I can tell for sure. But in my testing in the garage, the power and pop testing, it actually was a little less powerful than
I kind of felt that too.
the Kevlar paddle, which was surprising because the Kevlar paddle has the strange layup. It has Kevlar on the top, that 3K Kevlar weave, and then 3 layers of carbon fiber underneath that on each side. So it's 4 layers on each side for the layup, which is pretty dense. That's probably what gives it its dense feel versus a 3-layer on each side layup for the All Court. And the All Court is the only one with fiberglass. I think it's unidirectional carbon fiber, fiberglass, unidirectional carbon
CFC,
fiber.
right?
Yeah, yeah. So you would think that fiberglass is going to give it more power. I did not feel it, but like I said, I need more time. Maybe it is there, and I just haven't.
I didn't
tapped
feel
into
a
it
difference.
Yet. Didn't feel a difference.
No.
Okay. So yeah,
Kind of turning into the shaver wars. We start off with 1 blade razors, and now we're up to like 6.
exactly.
Gillette Mach 6.
I know. Yeah, my razor is just like this thick. I'm just like, is that going to
They're
take
all
my
stacked up on
skin
top
off?
of
I
each
don't
other.
know. But yeah, I think I do like that 4-layer layup. I think it does make it feel more solid, less hollow, and maybe the extra layer compensates for adds some extra power to it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, let's move on. The GRUVN.
Moving to GRUVN.
GRUVN LAZR. So this is their 16. This is their S shape, their standard shape. So it's not a wide body. It's standard. It's 8x16. But man, I've loved all their shapes using this S shape so far. So we had that 13S originally with that little firecracker of a poppy paddle. And I'm getting used to the shape. It doesn't seem so lollipop-ish to me anymore. Maybe it does to you still.
Still doesn't do it for me. Sorry, GRUVN.
But man, it plays well. And to me, this one, by the way, got the best spin for me. I noticed it on the court, and then even the spin test, it got 2,200, just over 2,200 RPM. I also noticed when I was playing it, this is the fastest of the 4 or 5 paddles that we tested.
I was going to say,
today.
very maneuverable.
Really maneuverable. And it has the lowest swing weight and the lowest balance point for all
That's
these
kind of
paddles.
become their niche, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah, but I mean, they make
They
very
do that better
maneuverable
than
paddles.
anybody, and they do it in a way where it feels solid still, unlike some of the. I mean, we'll talk about other paddles in a bit, but this one it kind of gets to that sweet spot. Forgive the metaphor, but of maneuverability as well as solidity.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the sweet spot on this felt exceptionally good. So all of the sweet spots on all these paddles are good. This one hit a nice balance to me. I'd say it's not quite as big as the Fat Boy, but it is a slightly narrower paddle. 0.1 of an inch, so not much. But it does make a little bit of a difference. But I'd say if I were comparing this to other standard shape paddles, this one has a bigger sweet spot to me.
I will say that the lollipop shape, as much as I don't visually love it, it does lend to a certain predictability in the sweet spot. You know, with something round like that, the sweet spot's going to be right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it does feel like you can trust the paddle. You know, if you hit it in the right spot, it's going to give you the response that you want.
Bingo.
Yes. All right, let's move on to the Honolulu J3K and J3K Pro.
Picking up right where the J2K left off.
Yeah.
Solid offerings.
Yeah, so this one I'd say of all of them, it feels like it has the longest handle. I don't know if it's longer than the
I
624,
think it's about the same.
but it has, you can see, has a more
Tapered.
less flared taper.
Yeah.
So that's what I think I'm feeling. I'm able to get my hands further up the neck of the paddle on two-handed backhands. But yeah, I mean, I did a review not too long ago of the J2K, and this plays as I would expect it to play compared to the J2K as a wide body or standard shape paddle. You know, it's like a J2K, just a little shorter and a little wider. Very solid paddle. It gets good spin. It's right in the middle of this group of paddles we tested today in terms of the power control spectrum. You know, it's not the most powerful of the group. It's not the most control oriented of the group. And that was the same with the J2K. It was just like, it's right in the middle of everything, which is a good place to be for a lot of people, right?
Easier to maneuver than the J2K.
For sure. Good spin. And then of the two, I still prefer the J3K over the J3K Pro, same as the J2Ks. J3K, the Pro models are $10 more, not a big difference. But it's just purely a subjective preference for me. The Pros have a tighter weave and they feel a little stiffer, and I like a little plusher feel on my paddles. But I think you had the opposite feeling.
Yeah, which
right?
is not what I was expecting. I was expecting the same thing that we saw in the J2K, where we both kind of preferred that non-pro version because of those same reasons. But it seems like those reasons were a little bit flipped on the J3K. I felt there was a little bit more maneuverability in the Pro without a loss of consistency. And there was no trade-off in power either. So if you can gain something without losing, I think you're onto something.
Gotcha. I need to go back and check the swing weights of these. I feel like they're pretty similar, but yeah, maybe the Pro is a little lighter swing weight, more maneuverable.
So by my measurements, I've got the J3K at 115 and the Pro at 111.
Oh, so there is a significant difference. Okay. Yeah, well, that makes sense then. It does feel a little more hollow, the Pro, than the J3K did to me. So you're losing some of kind of that plow through with the lesser swing weight, but you're gaining hand speed with that. So it is a trade-off. But yeah, interesting that you preferred the Pro on that one.
Yep.
All right. We forgot to bring the Spartus Apollo, but that was the last one we tested. And this one, I don't feel like I've given it due credit. I've had it now for a while. I've ran the metrics on it. I think it was the first wide-body Kevlar, all Kevlar option on the market. And it's the best priced as well out of this group. And it plays really well. It is all control. If you are into control and Kevlar and wide body, then this is your paddle. It doesn't have a lot of offensive options. There's not a lot of power, not a lot of pop. But there's good spin, really wide sweet spot. I have not tried it with perimeter weighting on it, but I think that would really shore up some of that twisting that happens with all wide bodies and make that thing just a controlled beast.
It does have a really nice sweet spot. I wasn't aware of the price, so I wasn't really factoring that in, but that's good to know. If it's that good for that price, then yeah, I think they're onto something. What I didn't love was the general shape of it. It's definitely got that sort of squared off spatula look to the extreme, I would say, in this case. And it feels very thin to me.
Okay.
It's got a very light swing weight, probably less than 110.
Yeah.
And even on-center shots felt very thin to me.
Yeah, I agree that it is, of the paddles we tested today, one of the more hollow feeling paddles.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, it doesn't have the plow through that the Fat Boy and the Monarch do, for example. But it is the best price of all of them. Like I said, with the code, it's $117. That's
a good deal.
wicked cheap.
Yeah.
That's a
You can go a
really
long
good
way
deal.
with this paddle.
And I do want to mention also the runner-up for the best price of the paddles today is 11624 is Monarch, which is only $150 after.
That's a killer price.
Yeah, after discounts. So really good price. All of these are reasonably priced as well. I think the Fat Boy was the most expensive, but good stuff all around. I've grouped them into categories too. So best hand speed, I have the GRUVN LAZR. Like I said, it has the lowest swing weight and the lowest balance point, and I just felt like that thing was a rocket in my hand. Most power was the 11624 Monarch Control. Most pop, tie between the Fat Boy and the J3K. J3K, I didn't notice the pop when I was hitting with it. It doesn't feel as solid and a little more hollow than the Monarch and the Fat Boy. But yeah, it got good pop in my test. So most pop, tie between the Fat Boy and J3K. Best control, 100% the Apollo. That's the control paddle of the group. Eddie, what if you had to choose your favorite 3 of these paddles, which would they be?
Well, let me ask you the question this way. Of the paddles we tested, which one would you pick for serves and drives?
Definitely the Monarch. Yeah, the Monarch Control. It had the most power with full swings for me.
The Monarch. Okay.
Yeah. How about you?
Same.
Okay.
Yep. What about for, let's say, mid-court resets, blocks, that kind of thing?
Well, now we're getting into specific attributes of the paddle. Definitely, if I was playing the control game, it would be the Spartus Apollo for resets. Yeah.
I'd probably pick the Fat Boy in
Would you?
that circumstance.
Okay.
What about kitchen play, firefights,
Yeah.
volleys, that sort of thing?
So tie for me between the Fat Boy and the GRUVN LAZR.
Okay.
Because the Fat Boy is going to have more put-away power with that superior pop, but the LAZR has more hand speed maneuverability, so you're more likely to get things back that are sped up at you.
I can definitely see
Yeah.
that, and the J3K Pro.
Yeah.
I would put that up there as well.
Gotcha.
But to answer your question, my favorites, if I had to pick my top favorite, it would be the Monarch. I think that's, they could have just as easily named that the All Court because I feel like it can do it all.
Yeah.
And really close to that would be the Fat Boy for me.
So my top 3, in no particular order. So the Fat Boy, Monarch Control, and then the GRUVN LAZR. And they serve my game, so those are personal preferences. But I like the defensive options of the kitchen and defensive options of the baseline that the 11624 and the Bread and Butter offer. And then the GRUVN LAZR, I feel like, is a really nice balance among these paddles for having the offensive options, but also, wide sweet spot and some superior hand maneuverability as well. So those 3 are my favorite. Again, personal preferences. That's you and me.
Yeah.
If you are a control player, resetter all day, I would go with the Spartus Apollo. If you prefer stiffer feeling paddle, more lightweight, that's the J3K Pro. There's a lot to choose from in these options we have today.
Tell you what, take off your scientist hat and put on your artist hat. Which one's the best looking?
Ooh, best looking. It's got to be the Fat Boy.
I agree.
100%. The colors, the colorways, the shape.
The shape is
elegant
just
paddle.
as good as I think you can make a wide body.
Right. Yeah. All right.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. We got some deep dive topics. Let's get through these. I wanted to test, the first topic I wanted to test was what has superior spin, Kevlar face paddles or raw carbon fiber paddles. So I've got this paddle database with over 200 paddles in it now, so I can start crunching numbers and answering these kind of questions with some level of, exactness, right? So I did
We're
the numbers.
talking about carbon fiber Kevlar weave.
Yes, so I included in
comparison.
the Kevlar group, I included like the Apes, which is a hybrid Kevlar carbon fiber, and I included the 100% Kevlar like the Ruby and like the Spartus Apollo.
Okay.
So all those went into Kevlar, and then anything raw carbon fiber that did not have Kevlar went into the carbon fiber group. And I only use for this paddles with peel ply technology, so that raw technology, nothing with grit. Okay, those were all excluded.
All right.
Okay, so I took a mean and standard deviation. So I was thinking before I went into this, okay, will there be a difference? And if not in the mean, then perhaps there'll be a larger standard deviation in one or the other. My hunch was that Kevlar faced paddles have a higher standard deviation. I did not know whether or not there'd be a difference in spin on average, because
You want to explain standard deviation for those not in the science or math?
right. So basically, the standard deviation is a bigger spread of values of results. So, if your paddles were getting spin from all the way from 1,000 to 2,400, that's going to be a big standard deviation. If it's 21 to 2,300, really small standard deviation.
Spread around the mean.
Yeah, exactly. So how far is it spread around the mean? So to the results. So Kevlar paddles on average achieved 2,057 RPM with a standard deviation of 200. So basically 2,000 plus or minus 200, up to 2,200 down to 1,800. Raw carbon fiber averaged 2,051 with a standard deviation of 210.
Okay.
So just a slightly larger standard deviation, but man, those values for average and standard deviation could not be any tighter for these two. So what this is telling me is that it's all about the peel ply and very little about the fibers beneath it. Which I was kind of surprised. Like I said, I thought that there would be a bigger standard deviation, a bigger spread for the Kevlar paddles, because all the Kevlar paddles are using the 3K twill cloth with a peel ply over it. And most, if not all, of the raw carbon fiber textures are using unidirectional carbon fiber. So I figured that would manifest in some kind of difference in the numbers here, particularly with regard to the spread around the mean, but it didn't. Yeah, so there is a much smaller sample size for the Kevlar paddles. I had 23 paddles in that sample, and I had 138 paddles in the raw carbon fiber sample. But given that they're so similar, I imagine that these results are fairly accurate.
Statistically insignificant difference?
Absolutely. So spin's going to be very similar, the same for the most part for Kevlar faced versus raw carbon fiber paddles. And then the question is, which lasts longer? So I think that one is more convoluted in terms of durability, because the materials beneath are going to play into how quickly the peel ply texture degrades over time, to a greater extent, I think, than spin, because spin's almost entirely manifest with the peel ply texture and dwell time. And dwell time on all of these is going to be very similar. On the Gen 3 paddles, it's going to have a bigger dwell times and more spin. Regardless, well, that was an interesting little tidbit to delve into.
Actually quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So why would you buy one versus the other? What other aspects do they bring to the pickleball calculus that factor in then?
So Kevlar, in general, is going to feel softer, more plush. And the question is that an inherent attribute of the Kevlar itself, or is it more related to the fact that the Kevlar paddles are using that twill weave cloth versus the unidirectional carbon fiber that's used on raw carbon fiber? And cloth's going to have a little more give. So maybe we're feeling that. Maybe that's what the plushness comes from. The other thing is purely aesthetic. Like you can get Kevlar in any color versus black carbon fiber, right? And you can see the colorful paddles behind me. This is the new Apes, by the way. It's not out yet. The Apes has a wide body coming, but it's not out yet. It's pretty. It's cool to have different colors on your paddle. So it provides more color options than carbon fiber. But as yet, we don't really know if there's a durability difference. So we'll see.
Frankly, I just think it's cool that we can use your database for so many of these kinds of comparisons. I mean, what's next? We can certainly take community input on that. But the fact that you've got now so much information is really cool.
It just keeps increasing.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I came up with a new metric on the database. You and I haven't talked about this. I didn't have it in the notes, but I was just working on it last night, and I want to roll it out on the Fat Boy review. And this is a control score. So if you remember that my last metric is the firepower score, and what brought that about is kind of rearranging the radar charts that I have, and bringing all the power related stuff over on the left side of the chart and the control stuff on the right. And I was like, all right, if I have metrics leading to that firepower score, why not try that with the control score too? So it's not just a subjective, I think this is a 95 control. This is actually dipping into the metrics in my database, miles per hour, swing weight, et cetera. So not swing weight, but the metrics going into the control score are twist weight, spin, and pop. So twist weight and spin both increase the score as they go up. Pop decreases the overall score as it goes up. So what I did was take the percentiles of twist weight and spin and the percentiles of pop, and then convert all of that into a scale of 100. I weighted twist weight and spin equally, which is up for debate whether or not that is the most accurate way to gauge control. I might play around with maybe reducing the input of spin a little bit and increasing.
So wait, you're using
twist
raw
weight.
values.
So ultimately, it's converted to a scale of 1 to 100, which is basically percentiles.
I gotcha.
Right? Yeah. So I weigh the spin and the twist weight. And twist weight, by the way, correlates with the sweet spot of the paddle, which is why I included it. And then for pop, I'm also looking at percentiles, but I wanted to not, let's say that it's 100th percentile for pop. I didn't want to subtract 100 from the control score. That seems silly. So I have a maximum of 20 points that can be subtracted for pop. And the reason I wanted to subtract pop is because you're more likely to pop balls up with a higher poppy paddle, and that leads to less control. So for example, the highest 100th percentile for pop in my database is the UPA Gen3 and a Bright Scorpius, right? But just because it has the highest pop score doesn't mean it has zero control. So that one took 20 points off for pop, bringing it down to still a reasonable control score. This metric is not perfect. I've updated my database. You can get on to johnqpickleball.com, look at the paddle database, scroll all the way to the right. You can sort by control, and you'll see Mach 2 Forza right at the top, and down at the bottom is the Selkirk Power Air that all the grit fell off. You know, there's no spin on that thing. It was a defective paddle. So things line up mostly according to what I would expect. There are a few kind of oddballs in there. So it's not a perfect system, but it's a useful system for sure. And, you know, we're never going to achieve perfection. I put beta on this.
Okay.
It's very much in its beta form. I will consider options if you have any ideas on this. Be glad to hear it in the comments section. And, you know, I will continue to play with this and tweak it.
I'm curious as to what your process is, John, not to take you off track too much, but when you're trying to think of something like control as a metric, do you have a paddle in mind like a Lux or a Quartz or something along those lines that you then want to try and build a formula around, or is it the opposite?
It's the opposite.
Okay.
I try to make it more deductive, you know, instead of inductive, starting from the paddle and going up to the formula. But once I create the formula, I do check the paddles to see if they fall in line with what I expect, right? And yeah, it seems to work pretty well. Like I said, there's a few oddball paddles that don't seem like they're in the right place when you sort by control. But for the most part, it's very useful. Now, I will say that you know, if we ever develop a means of easily measuring exit velocity, I will use that instead of pop, right? Because that's a more reliable measurement. Same with, let's say we were able to provide a heat map and measure the exact size and area of the sweet spot. That's clearly going to take the place of twist weight, because twist weight is an indirect measurement of sweet spot, and it's not even directly correlated. Sometimes it is correlated, but it's not 1-to-1, right? And you know, spin. If we had those two measurements, the actual area of the sweet spot and the coefficient of restitution, I would weight spin into the equation much less than it currently is. But spin is absolutely a part of control, right? You're able to shape balls better. If you're not able to put shape on balls, you're suffering in control.
So off the top of your head, do you remember like the top 3 or 5 control?
Like I said, the LAZR Mach 2
right.
4 is up top. There's an Engage up there as well. The Proton Series 1 14 millimeter is up there. That I feel like is a bit of an oddball. Don't get me wrong, it's a good control paddle, but the sweet spot on that is not as wide as the twist weight suggests, you know? And I mentioned that in my original review too. I think it would benefit from edge foam to broaden that sweet spot a bit, or even just edge weight. It's already a heavy paddle though, so you're kind of limited. Anyway, yeah, go check it out. And those are the top 3 in my head that pop out. And then on the bottom, like I said, is the Selkirk Power Air 14 millimeter with with a worn down face, a used one. The original like Gearbox Ultimate Power stuff, those really thin, lightweight paddles with a horrible twist weight and no spin.
Yeah.
Those are all at the bottom as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to checking that out.
And let's move on to another update on kind of our nerdy level of indices and metrics. I have an update on the hand speed index. So the reason why I've been slow in adopting this or considering to adopt it is because I wanted to test it. I think there's a lot of potential in the balance point of pickleball paddles that is unrealized so far. And I don't want to get it wrong. I don't want to be the first guy to be like, I found the hand speed index, which relates to the balance point, and you can manipulate the balance point and control your hand speed. I didn't want to get that wrong. I totally trust Brian from Graffiti's math on this, but he's giving what I take him. He's taking what I give him and producing the calculations. So I didn't want to get it wrong, and I wanted to test it more. So all of this slice cap business, I've been testing. I've been recording the original stock weight of the paddles, swing weight, twist weight, and balance point, and after manipulating the weight with the lowering the balance point, what it translates to in terms of how I feel it plays versus what the formula says it plays. So I think I am going to push forward with the index, but I'm not going to call it hand speed index. I'm going to call it paddle whip, because there is an inherent calculation within the formula that the paddle is moving. So Brian, being the very intelligent person he is, figured out how to calculate based on swing weight, balance point, measurements of the paddle, the length and width, what the exact power needed to move the paddle 180 degrees from here to here or vice versa in 0.2 seconds. So what are the watts required to do this, basically? Now, this is the movement, and he's assuming that the balance point of the paddle is going to move 40 centimeters from where you start to where it ends. So that is this movement. That is not this movement, right? That's a very big difference.
Yeah.
So this is mostly wrist, and the lower you drop your balance point, the easier it's going to be and quicker to make that movement up to a point. You can't put 20 pounds in here and still be quick, but it's kind of like that trebuchet effect, right? Like the trebuchet has a counterbalance, and it whips through and it throws the ammunition really far very quickly. So that's what I found, and it's not just restricted to flicks at the kitchen. That's clearly the most obvious translation of that movement, but it's also drives. If you're a wristy player like Jack Sock, watch Jack Sock's drives. He's leading with the butt cap of the paddle, and right before contact, he whips through it with his wrist. So Jack Sock with a slice cap, I think, would be brutal. So it's going to increase drives if you're heavy on the whip through. So that's why I wanted to change it, not hand speed, but paddle whip. Now, Brian is also keen on testing what happens when you change the 40 centimeters to a meter. And that is going to be next. So we're testing if you are pivoting on your elbow. Let's say somebody speeds up at you and you have a forehand shield, but it comes to your left shoulder. What does it take to get the paddle from here to here, that 180 degrees without the wrist, but all pivoting on the elbow? I imagine that the speed caps, the slice speed caps, will not help and actually probably hinder that movement because you're carrying more weight. It's not doing much to counteract that weight.
More of a static weight issue.
Yeah. So there we have it. I think we'll introduce, and Brian will have a calculator on his website at Graffiti. You can enter it yourself to find out. You can enter your paddle statistics. If you have the swing weight, dimensions, and balance point, you can get the wattage required to move that paddle 40 centimeters from here to here. And then I'll put it on my database, and I'll have the watts and then percentiles to show kind of the hand speed. Not the hand speed, the paddle whip index, right? So there we have it.
That's getting nuts, man.
Yeah. I think
your database is going to need some, I don't know, the spreadsheet is great, but
oh yeah,
it gets a little unwieldy after a while.
That's under work. So I'm working with a developer, a fan of our podcast,
awesome.
and met him in San Clemente, and him and his colleague are currently working on solutions to make the website better in general, and in particular the database. Yes.
Awesome.
All right. How much time do you have left, Eddie?
We've got 12 minutes.
12 minutes. All right. We can get into a little Q&A.
Yeah. You want to do one real quick here?
Yeah.
So basically, this comes from Sorry. We'll just say it's from a listener. So basically, the firepower metric is analogous to core for mid and higher total velocities.
Yes. A core meaning COR,
Yeah.
coefficient of restitution.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that's an apt observation. It's a very indirect measurement of COR, exit velocity. But yeah, that's what it's going to correlate to primarily. So my firepower metric, again, is the next to newest metric in my database, and I'm looking at power and pop. It's basically a meta-analysis or meta score for power and pop on a scale of 0 to 100, right? So if a paddle is really high in both power and pop, it's going to score close to 100. And yeah, I think COR depends on obviously the speed in which the cannon is shot at the paddle. And I think for the most part, from what I've heard on what the USAP is doing and what Pickle Pro Labs is doing, they're firing the ball pretty hot. I think 60 miles an hour plus. I imagine that 60 miles an hour is probably a pretty good starting point to measure exit velocity, but it's going to be different if you shoot it at 30 miles per hour versus 100 miles per hour, right? I think on the same paddle, it's going to be vary. So I think, yeah, the pop and the power metric combined into one firepower metric is a good kind of indirect way to kind of get at COR at this point, right? And when and if it does ever happen where we can measure it ourselves, it'll be fun to run a correlation on the two metrics.
All right. One more?
Yeah, one more.
Let's go for it. This one's from Sail Camaraderie about the Proton 4. Interested in a comment that there's bidirectional carbon weave topped by a Kevlar raw surface. Is that all topped by a peel ply as well? And what's the benefit?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question, and one that I don't exactly know the answers to. I have not gotten the answers from the owners of Proton yet. Specifically what it's supposed to do, you can feel when you rub your fingers on the Series 4, it feels almost fuzzy, right?
Right.
And I was told that's the exposed Kevlar weaves. Back up for a second. We'll touch on that in a second, on the Kevlar weaves again in a second. But to answer the question, is all of this topped with a peel ply? Yes, it is. I looked at this under a microscope, and it's the standard coarse peel ply over a twill weave. So I think that what they mean by bidirectional is the underlying twill weave has fibers going this way and fibers going this way, and that's going to have a different response than fibers running the same direction, so unidirectional. But if you look at, presumably every twill weave is going to have bidirectional positioning of the fibers. I don't know if that's entirely true. I might be wrong on that, but I don't think that's entirely unique, the bidirectionality. What is more interesting to me is the exposed Kevlar fibers. And like I said, it feels like you can feel them. And looking at it under a microscope, you can see kind of these dots. And I need to analyze it a little more under a microscope. I just got a new microscope, which is going to help me out with this. Look at it more obliquely to see if you can actually see some of the fibers raised up. But I'm seeing what looks like little circular dots within the peel ply itself. I don't know if those are inclusions in the peel ply or those are actually
fibers running
through.
Right.
And I remember Charles telling me at the Proton event that the idea behind it increases the longevity of the spin because when those fibers wear down and the peel ply wears down, there are more fibers beneath there coming up to help grab the ball and spin.
Wow.
I don't know if that's legitimate or that's
like
actually what he
teeth.
said.
They
but
lose one and there's 5 more waiting in the wings.
Right. Yeah. So more research is needed. But yeah, thank you for those questions.
All right. It's time to wrap things up, John.
Yes, sir. We have one camera down, 2 still going. So
any final thoughts on the day?
No, I've got to get to recording the Fat Boy review. Try to get that out tomorrow. That's gonna be a big
night
challenge.
for you.
Yeah. But yeah, how about you?
And we're taking a week off, right?
Next week, I am in Yellowstone with the kids
You could do a remote
from the campsite
from
with
Old
my
Faithful.
phone. Yeah. How about you? Any plans?
I've got the Rocky Mountain this Friday,
That's right.
singles, men's singles. So crossing my fingers
crossed.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's aspects of this tournament that I like. I like that it's a round robin to start in 2 pools. That's kind of become the thing. I think that's the go-to. But unless you're the top team or top, in this case, singles player coming out of the pool, you don't have a shot at gold or silver. And I don't really like that aspect of it. So
Yeah.
we'll make the best of it. But I really like it when, if you're in the top 2, then you have a chance for
Yeah. Well, at least you get to play several games. How many people are in your bracket?
8.
8 people? All right. Well, you get at least 8 games.
Well, it's 2 pools.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So 3 games in the round robin.
All right. All right. Well, good luck on that. I'm sure you'll do well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Are you playing today also?
Yeah, heading up to Longmont for open play and
Oh, nice. Excellent.
hopefully try out a YOLA ball for in anticipation of this Friday. And then,
Yeah. Remind me to grab one before you leave.
okay, you're a warehouse of pickleball equipment.
That's right. All right, Eddie. Well, good times.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thanks so much.
Have a good one.
And have a good one.